Hello, I'm Pastor Dave, and this is our final session on Methodist Doctrine, looking specifically at Methodist Doctrine and the Methodist Ethos, or Ethos. And that's going to be our opening question this night. What is an ethos? Take a few moments and don't cheat by looking in the dictionary. Well, since I use the word, I should be able to define it. And to make it very simple, ethos is a way of life. Now, this can be an interesting topic as we've been looking more at doctrine, which tend to be academic or legalistic doctrines, and documents to say what we believe and do not believe. But, especially being Methodist and having our rule book be the book of discipline, obviously, doctrine is supposed to be incorporated into how we live. They're not two separate entities. And really, the morality and ethics that we preach and teach are supposed to be who we are. They're supposed to be part of our lives and more than just a set of rules or something we get tested on, but kind of how we live our lives. It should encompass all of it, which really, having gone through the process to becoming an ordained elder, they do to us, looking not just at our understanding, but also how we live our lives and live out our faith. This isn't always easy. One of the things we have to deal with is morality, especially personal morality. It's not something that people often like, and we can look at this as being a part of some of the issues we're having today. Because throughout actually the history of Methodism, we've had some very strict rules regarding personal morality. If we think today is bad in our current debates over human sexuality, we used to have very, very strict teachings about smoking, drinking, and basically prohibiting that amongst members and definitely prohibiting them amongst clergy. Actually, when my father first came into ministry in the old Methodist church, he had to take a pledge not to drink or smoke as part of that process. But kind of what's interesting with all of this is that we have an interesting take on a lot of this. And this comes from this is our background. As I've talked about personal morality, but then we also have an understanding of social morality. And some, like Dr. Campbell, on whom we've based this book, have basically stated that Methodists have had typically what would be considered a progressive social morality. Now, in fairness, when he wrote the book, it was 1999, and the idea of progressive probably had less politically charged definition at the time. When he was looking at it, it was more of looking in the history of Methodism and Methodists taking a strong stance against slavery and being pro-abolitionists, or their role in combating racism, or championing the role of women and children in society before those became a very popular stance to take. One of the ones he missed, I would also point out, would be in the late 19th century. Methodists were very involved in the temperance movement as well, including my great-grandmother and great-great-grandmother, at least one of which was kind of more brawling in their temperance. Interestingly enough, this stance led to the foundation of the Temperance Union and their purchase of a building for their use in D.C. that we still own to this day, called the General Board of Church and Society building. It's still there. Now, we can look at all this and go, well, that's the past. How's this part of today? And really, we have two very interesting stances. And when we look at it as a whole, we tend to have had very restrictive personal morality standards, but more progressive social morality standards, which champion those on the margins. And this really actually comes about because of that stance on full sanctification. This is something Dr. Campbell notes when he stated that in the pursuit of sanctification, one's will and affections were progressively transformed, so that by grace a person came to the point where she genuinely disliked evil and genuinely desired to do good. Basically, in other words, there is a constant change as we go through sanctification. And given the sanctifying grace of God, where we desire to do more good and turn away from evil. And some of this is seen in our general rules, which have 3 headings in them. That they are to avoid evil of all sorts, do good in all sorts, and attend upon the ordinances of God. These ordinances being public worship, ministry of word, either read or expounded, supper of the Lord, family and private prayer, which, when everything was shut down, how many people did family prayer at home when they couldn't go to church? Just saying. Searching the scriptures, fasting, and abstinence. These are things that we're supposed to do and are supposed to help also us along in that sanctifying process. And the last 3 especially are very Methodist in their practice and in their historical basis. Which also means this is the basis of that Wesleyan Methodist ethos that we're supposed to live. This is how we're supposed to apply our faith into our personal life. Now, the general rules of Wesley do give us a list of things that we should not do. And this is where we get into that personal morality. The things that we're supposed to avoid include taking the Lord's name in vain, fighting, quarreling, brawling, brother going to law against brother, returning evil for evil, railing for railing, using many words in buying or selling, and uncharitable or unprofitable conversations. Some of those we would put in different terms today. This is some of the other things that were expected, that this has been part of the Methodist ethos for most of our history. To avoid fighting, avoid gossip, avoid things that are unnecessary. But also, generally speaking, also within that personal morality, we do get other aspects that are just in our personal life that we're supposed to hold to. And some of these can be very hard for people. Things that impact our life really include intimacy within a marriage that's recognized by both state and church, modest dress without gold or costly apparel. We're supposed to avoid the surplus accumulation of wealth and give all we can in charity. We're supposed to be temperate in alcohol, specifically distilled liquor. Look through history, you can see that's typically where the issue is in the first place. But also, we're to avoid worldly amusements and avoid gambling. And all this includes our charity. We are to be charitable in giving financially, but also we are to engage face to face with the poor, the sick, the dying, the exploited, and the suffering. This is all part of our personal morality. Things that we are to avoid, which are things that typically draw us further away from God, but also how we live and how we express ourselves. To be more respectful, more humble, as well as living out our faith daily in our lives. Out of everything I've said, going back all the way into what the general rules say that we should not do, taking the Lord's name in vain, quarreling, fighting, all those things, but into everything else. There's always places we can grow where we're not fully living up to everything. And really, even our social morality and our social stances really cover into all of this, into our historic stances on many things. And really, it makes sense given what our stress is, and that's on the social transformation. In the past, it was combating slavery and racism. It really deals with social ills. The United Methodist Church has a stance against lotteries. We still call for temperance, especially of liquor. We are against accumulating surplus wealth. There's a lot of the stuff that is still there today that we don't often get into. But all this combined creates a tension between our personal morality and that social morality. But really, we have to understand both and engage in both as Methodists, because in the Methodist experience, this is our task. It's living out the faith, yes, in our lives, but also living it in the world to live as Christ's witnesses in the world, which sometimes is not the easiest thing to do. But that's where we're going to wrap this up. I'll still give you an option if you want to do a little bit more. Look up the United Methodist Social Creed. It's about a 115-year-old creed from the former Methodist Episcopal Church. That still holds to us as a way of explaining the doctrinal standards of our faith, even if it's not doctrine at the level of the Articles of Faith or Articles of Religion or Confession of Faith. But that will wrap up our time looking at Methodist doctrine. Now we're going to be off for this summer. It's summertime. I get a break. You get a break. But over the course of the summer, we will start working on what we're going to get into this fall. And that is getting into the church's history. It's one of the areas that we tend not to teach in the church, but it does help explain how we got to where we are. So that's what we'll get into this fall. But until next time, I'm Pastor Dave. It's been a pleasure to go through this with you, and I look forward to our time this fall.